que sara qualquer pessoa, velha dona do mar.
On 25th May 2013, Africa celebrated our 50 years of unity, Pan-Africanism and Renaissance. Heads of states and government, friends of Africa, and other well-wishers gathered at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, to celebrate the struggle for peace, unity, and progress of the continent, legacies left behind by the founding fathers of the African Union.
Cada tua filha, uma ilha, pétala na água salgada, lágrima cristaliza.
While celebrating 50 years of unity and diverse challenges, the gathering in Addis Ababa in 2013 provided an opportunity for African leaders to do a review of the journey so far and set a fresh agenda moving forward.
We all remember the OAU, and for a long time the OAU main remit was to liberate the continent, liberate from colonialism, liberate from apartheid. Once those achievements were conquered, there was time to reflect about what should be the main focus for Africa's development. Since this liberation has been attained, a lot of debate was centered on governance and how we have to improve governance. We have to finish with military coups. We have to take very bold measures for us to be able to actually enter the debate in international scene with pride and make sure that Africans are respected. But on the other hand, people also started to realize we needed a different type of engagement with our partners. Then they went for the NEPAD, the New Economic Partnership for Africa's Development. Now, the NEPAD was a very strong mobilizing factor, but on the other hand, people realized that NEPAD was about partnerships. It's about dealing with the external actors that also are present in our development. And although that is still very much valid, we also need to center much more on our own. What do we want to do for Africa itself that is not necessarily to be negotiated with others? And I think out of that process, the African Union realized it needed a bolder vision. And that this bolder vision came very timely in terms of discussion when we celebrated the 50 years, the jubilee of the OAU-AU. And when you celebrate, you also want to take stock. And by taking stock, we realized that there are lots of things we didn't really accomplish. We were half through many of our objectives and aspirations. We needed a much more stronger energy and drive to be able to really transform the continent. And it was out of that discussion that the heads of state in Africa decided in 2013, in the next 50 years, which gets us to 2063, we really want a different Africa. We are going to be about 30% of the world population. And if we are going to be that sizable, we also need to have a sizable economic presence. We need to have a sizable understanding of the world that Africa is no longer going to be the residual deposit of some aid, of some poverty reduction programs. It's going to be a key actor for the future, because we are going to have the youngest population in the planet, and we are going to be a force to reckon with. So it is this aspiration that is behind the idea of Agenda 2063.
Mar, dono do mundo que sara qualquer pessoa, velha dona do mar.
Agenda 2063 offers a new paradigm in Africa's development and narratives. It represents an homegrown initiative and roadmap to meaningful development. In actualizing the 50-year development plan by the year 2063, captured in the phrase, "the Africa we want," an initial 10-year plan was set to kickstart the process of ensuring that the parameters are fully in place.
What is the Africa we want? It's an Africa where the large majority of the countries have now become middle-income or high-income countries, where you have significantly reduced or even eliminated conflicts, where you have actually had unemployment among the youth becoming something of the past and poverty completely eradicated, and where you have an Africa that is more integrated than it is today, and an Africa where women have their rightful place, and you have maternal mortality reduced significantly. So it's an Africa of high incomes, improved welfare of people, where people have access to education, to healthcare, to all the good things that other people enjoy in the rest of the world. An Africa that is peaceful and that is playing its rightful role in the international community.
Availability of appropriate data is critical to achieving growth and development. Over the years, therefore, Africa has suffered from lack of adequate and accurate data, which are essential for planning and development.
No, planning without data is almost like navigating without a compass. It is very, very difficult for you to plan properly.
Data is the key element for any development activity. And now in the current economic dispensation, data is actually the new currency, just as important as money.
The lack of data or inadequate data and statistics have been a major problem for planning and implementation of plans in Africa since independence, or even before. Unfortunately, this essential element has not been satisfactorily addressed. And this is making planning to become much more difficult, and to make plans to really become more effective in addressing the challenges that they're supposed to address.
The issue of armed conflict has remained one of the challenges of Africa, from Burundi to Mali, Central African Republic to Somalia, to mention but a few. Achieving Agenda 2063 will imply that the continent deal effectively with these lingering crises.
Well, if you compare Africa of today and Africa of 20, 30 years ago, you would tell me, you will realize immediately that there's a stark difference in terms of the number of conflicts that were here on the continent, some time ago, and the number of conflicts you have today. And you would see that there has been a steady progress in the reduction of conflicts. The Mano River region, whether it's Liberia, Sierra Leone, and the rest of them, we're all engulfed in conflict. But today, that's not the case. Unfortunately, they're suffering from a different kind of crisis. And if you look around, you will see that this was the case in many other countries, including Ethiopia, by the way. Whether it is Rwanda and Burundi, and you can go there even to do DRC and so on and so forth. So that's the past, which means that significant progress has been made in reducing conflicts. And the African Union, leaders in their wisdom, have had the initiative of silencing the guns by 2020. And I think this is a very important initiative. And they're doing everything possible to be able to achieve this noble goal. We used to think in the past that you have to have all the necessary conditions before development can happen. But to me, that is not accurate. Somebody wrote some time ago, there's a literature, some book I read somewhere ago, that China was a country that was always at war, because it's such a big country and they had a lot of difficulties, a lot of challenges. But the Chinese said to themselves, how can we develop in spite of all these problems we have? Not how can we solve all these problems and put the conditions all together before we can develop. And this is the story of many countries. This is the story Africa has to learn, that development must happen with or without complete peace and security.
One of the integral features of Agenda 2063 is the framework designed to ensure that Africa funds our development. Financing Africa's development will require that some of the continent's big economies serve as economic hubs and growth poles for sub-regional and regional economic transformation.
How do we fund all this transformation? In the past, each time we pronounce the word funding or financing, people immediately will think, oh, donors. How are the donors going to help us? Or investors going to help us? Well, we don't want really to throw the baby with the bathwater. But Africa is not going to develop with the money of the donors. Africa has to develop with its own resources. And there are many. So we have now to include in the Agenda 2063 process the entire debate about what we call domestic resource mobilization. It goes from taxes to pension funds, to how we deal with the remittances from our diaspora, to how we deal with the issues of illicit financial flows, to how we deal with the issues that the banks, commercial banks in particular, are not doing enough to help the small and medium-scale enterprises, how we deal with trade facilitation, all the way to how we handle the sovereign funds and the central bank reserves. So we have a huge potential that we are not using in a productive way, and this is the answer that Agenda 2063 is trying to convey. We have to have a self-centered African process for development.
Financing Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, it's at different levels. It's about sharing experience and how to improve that collection of revenue, starting from looking at how you collect taxes, how you improve that, to how you improve revenue coming from your resources, whether it's oil, gold, or whatever.
If you look into the numbers, we continue to be mostly exporters of raw materials. 80% of earnings from exports come from raw materials or commodities. And we continue not to transform them enough. In fact, almost nothing. Which means that we are exporting the natural richness together with the jobs, because the jobs are being fulfilled by transformation somewhere else. So this is a major problem, and we call it economic structural transformation. We need to move in the direction of industrialization. We need to industrialize our countries. And when we say industrialization, it's very important to qualify that we are not just talking about manufacturing. We are talking about industrialization in the sense that agricultural productivity has to be improved through agro-processing. So we don't just have peasants, we have farmers, and if possible, commercial farmers.
Finding synergies between the various national and sub-regional developmental plans into Agenda 2063 is strategic for African countries.
It is important to find a way to make sure that you have some kind of synergy and some kind of coherence between what is being done at the continental level and what is being done at the country level. And so this is where the challenge is. I think the way to go, and I believe the African Union Commission is also looking at this in the same way, that we have to find a way to domesticate the Agenda 2063. In other words, to find a way to integrate its principles at the country level. Because after all, the AU is not going to implement Agenda 2063. It can help to galvanize support and coordinate and maybe monitor, but the countries eventually will be the ones to implement it. But so the major point I'm making here is that these are not conflicting things that you say, I'm doing this, I'm going to do that, because the countries want to develop infrastructure. They want to make sure that they have employment for young people. They want to reduce poverty, and all these things are part and parcel of the Agenda 2063.
Local investment across the continent is certain to boost the economic aspirations spelled out in Agenda 2063. Already, African entrepreneurs are taking up this challenge. Leading the pack is Nigeria's Aliko Dangote, who recently launched a $500 million worth of investment in cement production in Ethiopia, which is expected to generate about 7,000 jobs for the locals.
Mar, dono do mundo. que sarà qualquer pessoa.
People are often asking the question whether Nigeria, with its size, is going to continue to play a big role in terms of the overall continent. For me, there is no doubt that the drive that is behind this growth in Nigeria is not just demographic. It's also the demographic that has created talent, that has created a pool of energy, human energy, that you can't find anywhere else in the continent. So I have no doubt that Nigeria's role and influence is going to keep growing. I consider Nigeria is a league of its own. It's poised to become a major influencer of politics beyond Africa. Now, of course, you can be blinded by Boko Haram right now. You can be blinded by the oil prices are going down. And all of those things are true, but they are short term. You have to look into the structural reasons why an economy like Nigeria is going to play such an important role. And I think those ingredients are very well recognized by the private sector that have made the country one of the main destinations for foreign direct investment. And when you ask some of these big investors, why are you investing in Nigeria? It's very confusing, it's very difficult, it's very unstable politically, or you have conflict. The answer that you get, if they are honest, is to say, it has such a large potential, there is no doubt that these things are going to be sorted out. And that's also my feeling. And that's why I believe that Nigeria is going to be one of the key drivers of Agenda 2063. In fact, Agenda 2063, to a large extent, is already inspired by some reforms taking place in Nigeria, like the ones in agriculture, where the productivity has gone up quite considerably in the last years, like the issue of privatization of electricity distribution, like the issue of big investments on infrastructure being facilitated by the local entrepreneurs, like your Mr. Dangote or Mr. Elumelu. So I think, the inspiration is already coming. And we need to see Nigeria in its comprehensiveness. We cannot just reduce to the simplistic view of Nigeria, because what is in the news, obviously, is always the negative.
A flor d'água fala. Cada tua filha, uma ilha, pétala na água salgada, na água salgada. Lágrima cristaliza, pétala na água salgada.
Human capital development is critical to propelling any developmental goal. Achieving Agenda 2063, therefore, will require that Africa harness our human resources to guarantee our future.
You have an Agenda 50-year plan that you want to implement. Do you have the capacity to do that? This is the question ACBF has asked. And ACBF is trying to help the African Union to respond to that question. I don't want to answer the question because we're in the process of determining whether or not that capacity is there. But one thing we know for sure is that one of the challenges, or one of the issues, or the reasons why previous plans have not been implemented is because of lack of capacity or inadequate capacity. And I'm talking about human capacity at the individual level. I'm talking about institutional capacity, and I'm also talking about organizational and capacity in the society as well. And I'm also talking about not just the skills the individuals have, or the capabilities they have to do things and do them properly, make policies and implement them, and take initiatives. But I'm also talking about the other, what they call the soft skills, which is things like having self-confidence, because development is not just a technical exercise. It is also an exercise that requires people to actually have a belief that they can actually develop. And for a long time, African countries have been lacking the confidence to think that they can actually do some things themselves. It's only when they began to see what was happening in some of the Asian countries that they say, well, wait a minute, if they can do it, we can also do it. And so that kind of capacity is also very important. It's as important as having the number of engineers that you need that are of high quality and that you can retain here and they can contribute in development. But also other things like attitudes of people, your attitudes towards development. We know quite well that there are certain people either because of their religious beliefs or because of their cultural something, do not see development in a good light. If we talk about gender equality, they don't recognize that it's a development issue. It is not just simply to make women happy. It is to say that if you really want to develop, you must use that part of your population, because you don't use them, then you cannot fulfill your potential. And two, that development itself is also making sure that everybody, men and women, their welfare is improved, their incomes go up, they improve their health outcomes, and so on and so forth. And so those kinds of attitudes that people have, or attitudes about the government, whether they see the state as an enemy or something that belongs to them or being part of them. And more importantly, at the continental level, if you remember, one of the major factors that helped Africa to decolonize is the spirit of Pan-Africanism. And that spirit seems to be disappearing, and which is also what is hobbling the attempt to have a more integrated continent. And it seems to me that we have to work hard in not just changing the mindset, but also making sure that the spirit of solidarity and Pan-Africanism is something that is also rekindled.
As Africans, we aspire that by the year 2063, Africa shall be a prosperous continent with the means and resources to drive its own development with sustainable and long-term stewardship of its resources.
Mar, dono do mundo que sara qualquer pessoa, velha dona do mar, vê minha flauta acorda em acordes na casa do rei, descansa.